The text was supposed to go to her sister. Instead, it went to the entire pack. Bailey's phone hit the floor with a sickening crack, the sound swallowed by Rowan's relentless, ear-splitting screams. For a second, the world narrowed to the glowing screen face-up on the grimy linoleum, the message bubble glaring back at her under the flickering fluorescent light. "Diane, I'm begging you. The baby's starving. I have no food, no money. I can't do this. I think I'm going to hurt him. Please come." But the contact name wasn't Diane. It was Pack Group Moonstone. 31 hours of no sleep. 31 hours of a screaming infant, of empty formula cans, of a bank account that laughed at her desperation. Her thumbs, clumsy with exhaustion and panic, had betrayed her. The message, her raw, shameful, private scream for help, had just been broadcast to every member of the Moonstone Pack, including Zane. Rowan's cries hit a new, glass-shattering pitch. Bailey's own breath came in ragged, shallow hitches, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Little did I know, that single me-sent text was the kill or choice that changed everything. The phone began to vibrate, skittering across the floor like a live thing. Names flashed on the screen. Fiona, Stephen, unknown numbers. Then one name, stark and simple, Zane. She couldn't pick it up. She couldn't move. The apartment, a cramped, dingy box that smelled of sour milk and despair, seemed to press in on her. The peeling wallpaper, the single bare bulb, the second-hand crib vibrating with Rowan's fury, it was all a monument to her failure. She was an omega, the lowest of the low in pack hierarchy, and she just announced her weakness to the world. The buzzing stopped. A terrible silence descended, broken only by Rowan's weakening, hiccuping sobs. It lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then a new sound, not her phone, a heavy, deliberate knock on her apartment door, not a friendly tap. A command. Bailey froze, her blood turning to ice water. She knew that knock. It resonated in her bones, a low, rhythmic thud that spoke of absolute, unassailable authority. "Alpha." "Bailey." The voice from the other side of the door was deep, calm, and brooked no argument. It was Zane. "Open the door." Her body moved against her will, the omega part of her responding to the direct order of her alpha. Her hand trembled violently as she turned the lock and pulled the door open. He filled the doorway. Zane Blackwood wasn't just tall, he was a force of nature. Broad shoulders strained against a simple black t-shirt, and his presence seemed to suck the oxygen from the hall. His hair was dark, tousled as if he'd run here, and his eyes, a startling pale amber that glowed even in the dim hall light, swept over her and into the apartment, missing nothing. The air between them crackled, a live wire of tension that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. It was always like this with him, a terrifying, electric pull that felt equal parts magnetic and lethal. His gaze landed on her, taking in her rumpled clothes, the dark circles like bruises under her eyes, the tremor in her hands. His nostrils flared slightly, scenting her fear, her exhaustion, the sharp tang of her despair. For a fleeting second, something raw and unguarded flickered in his eyes. Not pity, but a fierce, burning intensity that stole her breath. "Where is the child?" he asked, his voice lower now, a rough gravel that vibrated in her chest. "He's here. He's mine," Bailey stammered, instinctively stepping back to block the view of the crib. The possessiveness in her own voice surprised her. "I read your text," Zane said, stepping inside without invitation. The apartment shrank further. He closed the door behind him, and they were sealed in the tiny space together. His scent, pine, cold night air, and pure, potent alpha flooded her senses, overwhelming the sour smells of her home. "You said you were going to hurt him." "No, I didn't mean, I would never." The words tumbled out, choked with panic. "I was just tired, I was scared, I meant to send it to my sister." Your sister isn't Pack, Zane cut in, his tone leaving no room for argument. I am. The child is Pack. His safety is my responsibility. His eyes held hers, that amber glow pinning her in place. Is he in danger from you? The question was a blade. No, Bailey whispered, her voice breaking. He's hungry. I have nothing to give him. Zane's jaw tightened. He looked past her to the crib where Rowan had begun to fuss again. What is his name? Rowan. He gave a single, curt nod. Then he pulled his own phone from his pocket and spoke into it, his orders crisp. Fiona, I need infant formula, the premium kind. A case. Also groceries, basics, now. To the Omega's apartment. He paused, listening. I don't care what Steven says about Pack resources. Do it. He ended the call and looked back at Bailey. The authority radiating from him was a physical pressure. Fiona will be here within 20 minutes. Bailey could only stare, a confusing storm of relief and humiliation swirling inside her. He'd actually come, and he'd given an order to help her. Why? Omegas were cared for, but barely. They were the Pack's cleaners, its lowest laborers, not recipients of the Alpha's personal attention. Thank you, she managed to force out, the words ash in her mouth. Zane didn't acknowledge her gratitude. He was studying her, his head tilted slightly. You've been hiding him for 8 weeks. Why? The question was another hook, sinking deep. Mystery hook one. Why did Bailey hide her pregnancy and her son from the Pack? She looked away, her throat tight. It was safer. Safer than the protection of your Pack. His voice was dangerously soft. Before she could formulate a lie, another knock came, lighter this time. Zane opened the door to reveal Fiona. She was a beta, efficient and sharp-eyed, her arms laden with bags. Her gaze darted from Zane to Bailey, her expression carefully neutral, but Bailey caught the flicker of surprise. The formula, Fiona said, handing a can to Zane. Steven is voicing his concerns at the Pack house. Steven can voice them to me directly, Zane said, his tone leaving no doubt about how that conversation would go. He handed the can to Bailey. Their fingers brushed. A jolt, like static shock but warmer, more invasive, shot up her arm. She snatched her hand back, clutching the can like a lifeline. Zane's eyes narrowed, that amber light intensifying for a heartbeat. He'd felt it too. The undeniable forbidden pull, the mate bond. It was a myth, a fairy tale for other wolves, not for broken Omegas. That was my first mistake, thinking I could ignore it. Feed your son, Bailey, he commanded, but his voice had lost some of its edge. As she hurried to prepare the bottle, her back to them, she heard Fiona's lowered voice. Alpha, Isaac has been asking for you. He says it's urgent. Something about the northern border and the Silver Fang Pack. Zane's low growl was barely audible, but it raised the goose flesh on Bailey's arms. Isaac can wait. Mystery hook 2. What is the threat from the rival Silver Fang Pack? He's insisting, Fiona pressed gently. He said if you're preoccupied with Omega affairs, he'll handle it himself. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Bailey could feel Zane's anger like a change in barometric pressure. Isaac, the Pack's lead enforcer and Zane's second, was always challenging, always pushing the line between loyalty and ambition. Tell Isaac, Zane said, each word a chip of ice, that I will handle my Pack, he will hold the border, and he will remember his place. Yes, Alpha, Fiona murmured, a note of warning in her voice. She left quietly. The bottle was ready. Bailey lifted Rowan, her son's tiny, furious body finally calming as he fed, his desperate sucks the only sound. She dared a glance at Zane. He was watching them, his expression an unreadable mask, but his fists were clenched at his sides. Who is the father, Bailey? The question hung in the air, a guillotine blade. Mystery hook 3. The identity of Rowan's father, a secret with dangerous consequences. She kept her eyes on Rowan. He's gone, he's not Pack. A human, Zane's voice was deceptively calm. She nodded, the lie bitter on her tongue. You will both come to the Pack house, he stated. It wasn't an offer. Tonight. You cannot stay here. Panic flared anew. No, please, we're fine here. You are not fine, he said, taking a step closer. The air sizzled. You are starving, you are isolated, you are a vulnerability. The Pack protects its own, even its omegas, especially its pups. He reached out, not for her, but to gently move the blanket from Rowan's face. His knuckle barely grazed the baby's cheek. A low, almost imperceptible rumble sounded in Zane's chest, a pure alpha wolf sound of protection. The sound did something to Bailey. It unlocked a primal part of her she kept caged. A spark of defiance, hot and bright, flared through the exhaustion. I don't want your protection. I just needed some formula. Zane's eyes snapped to hers, glowing brighter. The wolf was right there, just beneath the surface. What you want is irrelevant. The moon is waxing. In 3 nights, it's full. Where will you shift, Bailey? In this closet. Who will protect your human child, while you are lost to the wolf? He had her, and he knew it. The full moon was the ticking clock she'd been desperately ignoring. The curse as metaphor for her own raging, trapped life. The horror of losing control, with Rowan helpless nearby. I'll manage, she whispered, but the fight was draining away, replaced by a deeper, more terrifying fear. You're coming to the Pack house, Zane repeated, finality in every syllable. Gather what you need for the child. We leave in 5 minutes. He turned his back, giving her a semblance of privacy, a small concession that felt like a victory. As she hastily threw diapers and onesies into a bag, her mind raced. The Pack house, where everyone would see her failure, where Isaac's disdain would be a tangible force, where Zane's unsettling presence would be a constant. She lifted Rowan, now sleeping deeply, his belly full for the first time in days. Zane took the bag from her without a word and opened the door. The night air hit her face, cool and clean. Zane's black SUV was idling at the curb. He opened the passenger door for her. As she slid in, he leaned in close to secure the car seat base. His body heat enveloped her, his scent drowning out everything else. His mouth was inches from her ear. One more thing, Bailey, he murmured, his voice a dark promise that made her blood sing and her soul tremble. We both felt it, the bond. We will discuss what that means once you're settled. Mystery Hook 4. The acknowledged mate bond. A forbidden attraction between an alpha and an omega that defies all Pack law. He closed her door and walked around to the driver's side. Bailey sat frozen, Rowan's soft breaths the only anchor in a spinning world. The car pulled away from the curb, taking her from the prison of her apartment toward the gilded cage of the Pack. They drove in silence through the sleeping town, into the wooded hills where the Moonstone territory began. The Pack house wasn't a house. It was a sprawling lodge of timber and stone, lights blazing from its many windows, a monument to Pack's strength. Several wolves loitered outside, their eyes reflecting the headlights as they pulled up. Zane got out, and immediately a figure detached from the shadows and strode forward. Isaac. He was almost as tall as Zane, but leaner, with sharp features and cold, gray eyes that swept over Bailey with open contempt. So you retrieved the stray, Isaac said, his voice a sneer. And her pup, how touching. Stand down, Isaac, Zane warned, his tone low. Isaac ignored him, leaning down to look through the window at Bailey. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. Welcome back, Omega. I trust you'll remember your place this time. And I do hope for the Pack's sake that the pup takes after his mother. He paused, letting the insult hang. The weak are so much easier to control. Mystery Hook 5. Isaac's specific, venomous hostility toward Bailey and her son. What does he know? Before Bailey could react, before Zane could intervene, Isaac's gaze fixed on Rowan's sleeping face in the dim car light. His smirk vanished. His eyes widened, then narrowed to slits. He looked from the baby to Bailey, then to Zane, a dawning, malicious understanding spreading across his features. "Well, well," Isaac breathed, his voice dripping with sinister delight. "Now this changes everything, doesn't it, Zane? Because the pup, he has your eyes." Isaac's words, "What is that?" hung in the grand room like a physical threat, his gaze a blade aimed directly at the bundle in Bailey's arms. The air, already thick with the scent of pine and dominance, curdled. Bailey's arms locked around Rowan, her exhausted body screaming to flee. But Zane's presence at her back was a wall, immovable and radiating a low, warning growl that vibrated through the floorboards. "That," Zane said, his voice a controlled avalanche, "is a pup of the Moonstone Pack. Your future packmate, Isaac, you will adjust your tone." He didn't raise his voice, but the command in it was absolute, bending the very atmosphere to his will. The other pack members in the room, a few betas lingering by the massive stone fireplace, an elder reading a paper, froze, their attention snapping to the confrontation. Isaac's lip curled, revealing a flash of white canine. He didn't look at Zane. His disdain remained fixed on Bailey. A pup, convenient, appearing from nowhere from her, right as the silver fangs are scenting blood on our borders. An omega who's been hiding in filth, and now we're to believe this. This infant is pure moonstone. Bailey felt the insult like a slap. Rowan, sensing the spike of her terror, let out a thin, reedy whimper. The sound, so small and vulnerable in the cavernous space, seemed to fracture Zane's control for a split second. A ripple of raw power, hot and protective, washed over Bailey's skin, raising the hairs on her arms. The mate bond, that forbidden thread between them, thrummed in response. "His lineage is not your concern," Zane stated, taking a deliberate step forward, placing himself more squarely between Isaac and Bailey. "My concern is his safety and the safety of his mother. They are under my protection. The full moon is in 3 days. They remain here." "Alpha," a new voice interjected, Stephen, a wiry man with a perpetually pinched expression, stepping forward from near the hearth. His tone was carefully respectful, but laced with practical disdain. "With respect, the Omega quarters are full since the Larson family arrived, and our supplies are allocated for the winter patrols. The Omega has, historically, not contributed. To house and feed 2 extra mouths, one a nursing mother who will require more." He left the sentence hanging, but the meaning was clear. She is a drain. He is a burden. Zane's jaw tightened. The internal conflict was visible for a heartbeat, the pragmatic Alpha weighing pack resources against the furious, possessive pull of the bond. Bailey's heart sank. This was what she'd feared. She was a problem to be solved, a leak in the pack's sturdy boat. "They will have my quarters," Zane said, and the room went utterly silent. Even Isaac looked stunned, his arrogant mask slipping into genuine shock. "You're... Alpha, you cannot be serious. The Alpha's quarters are the most defensible suite in the lodge with a separate bedroom and a lock on the door," Zane finished, his gaze sweeping the room, daring anyone else to speak. "Fiona." The beta, who had been standing attentively near the entrance, stepped forward instantly. "Alpha, take Bailey and the pup upstairs. Have the green room made up for the infant. Ensure she has everything she needs, food, clothing, whatever is required." He finally turned his head, his golden eyes meeting Bailey's. The authority was still there, but beneath it was a current of something softer, an unspoken apology for the spectacle. "Go, rest, you are safe here." The words were a command, but to her, they felt like a lifeline. Fiona gave a brisk nod and gestured toward a broad staircase leading to the upper floors. "This way, Bailey." As Bailey turned, Rowan clutched against her shoulder. She heard Isaac's hissed words to Zane. "You're letting sentiment override sense, Zane. This is a weakness the Silver Fangs will exploit. And that pup, I can smell it on him." Bailey didn't hear Zane's response. She was too busy climbing the stairs, each step taking her further from the judgmental eyes, her legs trembling with a fatigue so deep it felt geological. Fiona's footsteps were quiet and efficient behind her. "Don't mind Stephen," Fiona said, her voice neutral as they reached a wide, carpeted hallway. "He counts every grain of rice. And Isaac," she paused, choosing her words. "Isaac challenges every decision Zane makes that isn't his own. It's not personal." "It feels excruciatingly personal," Bailey thought, but she just nodded. The hallway was lined with doors, some open, revealing simple, tidy bedrooms. They stopped before a large, carved double door at the end. Fiona opened it. Bailey's breath caught. Zane's private quarters were nothing like her dingy apartment. It was a spacious suite dominated by a large sitting area with a worn leather sofa and shelves packed with books. A huge window looked out over the moonlit forest. An open door led to a bedroom with a massive bed, and another, smaller door was ajar, showing a pristine, pine-paneled room empty save for a rocking chair. The green room. "The bathroom is through there," Fiona said, pointing. "I'll bring up a bassinet, diapers, and some supplies. There's food in the kitchenette. Eat. The pack eats together in the main hall at 7, but given the circumstances, you're excused." The kindness, so matter-of-fact, was almost worse than the hostility. It made her want to cry. She just nodded again, her voice trapped in her throat. "Zane is a good alpha," Fiona said softly, pausing at the door. "Stubborn, but good. He wouldn't have brought you here if he didn't believe it was where you belong." With that, she left, closing the door with a soft click. The sudden silence was a roaring in Bailey's ears. She stood in the center of the luxurious room, her son in her arms, feeling like an imposter. The scent here was overwhelming: clean linen, wood smoke, and him. Zane. It was everywhere, seeping into her pores, both comforting and terrifying. The mate bond hummed, a live wire in her chest, responding to the pervasive evidence of his presence. What happened next changed everything. It wasn't a dramatic event, but a slow, quiet unraveling. She changed Rowan's diaper with the supplies from the go bag, her fingers fumbling. She managed to warm a bottle of formula under hot water in the small kitchenette sink. When she settled into the rocking chair in the green room and finally offered Rowan the bottle, he latched onto it with a desperate, gulping urgency that brought tears to her eyes. The simple, profound relief of feeding her starving child, in a warm, safe room, broke her. She cried silent, heaving sobs as Rowan drank, his tiny hand splayed against the bottle. The exhaustion, the fear, the months of hiding and starving and pretending, the seismic shock of Zane's arrival and the bond's awakening, it all crashed over her. She cried until her eyes were swollen, and Rowan, his belly full for the first time in days, fell into a deep, milky coma against her chest. The sound of the door opening downstairs, of deep voices and heavy footsteps, barely registered. She was adrift in a sea of relief and despair. She must have dozed, because the next thing she knew, the light in the room had changed, and a new, profound silence had fallen over the lodge. The middle-of-the-night silence. Rowan was still a warm, heavy weight against her. She carefully stood, her body protesting, and laid him in the center of the large bed, surrounding him with pillows. She needed to shower. She needed to wash the scent of despair and sour milk from her skin. She crept into the adjoining bathroom, closing the door most of the way to listen for Rowan. The hot water was a revelation. It scalded her skin, turning it pink, and she stood under the stream, letting it pound the tension from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she was truly, physically clean. She used Zane's soap, a crisp, cedar and sage scent that was unmistakably his, and the intimacy of it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the temperature. Wrapped in a towel, she padded back into the bedroom. The moon was high, casting a silver rectangle across the floorboards and over the bed. And that's when she saw him. Zane stood just inside the bedroom door, which she hadn't heard open. He was silhouetted against the dim light from the sitting room, having shed his leather jacket. His white t-shirt was stretched across the broad planes of his chest, and he was utterly still, watching Rowan sleep in the center of his bed. Bailey froze, her breath catching. The bond between them snapped taut, a visceral electric pull. She felt his exhaustion, a deep, leader's weariness, and beneath it, a turbulent storm of protectiveness and conflict. He sensed her. His head turned slowly, and his eyes found her in the shadows. They glowed faintly, a wolfish gold in the dark. There was no anger there now, only a profound, weary intensity. "He's quiet when he's full," Bailey whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them, a stupid, obvious observation. Zane's gaze didn't waver. "He should always be full." He took a single step into the room, the floorboard creaking under his weight. Isaac is right about one thing. The Silver Fangs are moving. A patrol scented a trio of them a mile inside our northern boundary tonight, testing us. A new fear, cold and sharp, lanced through Bailey. "Because of me, because they think I'm a weakness." "Because they are opportunists," Zane corrected, but his voice was grim. "But your presence here, revealed like this, it changes the pack's dynamics. It gives them a target." He finally looked away from her, back to Rowan. "I need to know, Bailey. I need the truth," his father. The question hung in the air, heavier than any command. This was the precipice, the secret she had guarded with her life. The bond screamed at her to tell him, to trust him, but 8 weeks of solitary fear built a wall just as high. "Why?" she deflected, her voice trembling. "So you can decide if he's worth the risk, so you can know what lineage you're defending." Zane was in front of her in 2 swift, silent strides. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was overwhelming, his heat, his scent, the power that rolled off him. "So I can know what I am defending," he growled, his voice low and rough. "That boy is Pack. By birth, by my decree, by the bond that is screaming at me right now to fix this. But the threat Isaac poses isn't just political. It's personal. He suspects something. I see it in his eyes. The truth, Bailey, now." She looked up into his face, etched with moonlight and shadow, and the last of her resistance crumbled. The words came out, a broken confession barely louder than a breath. "It was the night of the last summer gathering, a 1.5 years ago. The bonfire. You'd just become Alpha after your father's passing. The pack was celebrating. You were everywhere, the center of everything." She saw the memory flicker in his own eyes. The chaotic, fiery night, the thrum of a new Alpha's power intoxicating the entire pack. "I kept to the shadows, as Omegas do," she swallowed. "You'd been drinking the Alpha's mead, a lot of it. I was coming back from the river and you were there, on the path. You looked at me, and for a second it wasn't the look you give an Omega. It was something else, something hungry and lost. You didn't say a word, you just took my hand." Zane's expression was stone, but a muscle ticked in his jaw. He remembered nothing of that night after a certain point, a blur of fire and fever and grief. "You pulled me into the trees," she whispered, shame and a strange, aching sorrow coloring her voice. "And you kissed me, and I didn't stop you, I should have. But the bond, I felt it then for the first time. A spark. And you were my Alpha, and you were in pain, and I was just there." The silence that followed was deafening, filled only with Rowan's soft, sleeping sighs. It was a mistake, she rushed on, the tears coming again. You woke up before dawn, looked at me like I was a stranger, like I'd tricked you. You left without a word, and I knew I was an Omega. You were the Alpha. It was a shameful, forbidden thing, so I hid. I took the job in the town, I got the apartment. When I knew I was pregnant, I knew I had to hide him. From the pack, from Isaac, from you. I thought if you knew, you'd reject him. Or worse, you'd take him from me and cast me out. Zane closed his eyes. A low, pained sound rumbled in his chest. When he opened them, the gold was blazing. All this time, he breathed, you thought I would reject my own son. He's not just your son, Bailey hissed, mindful of the sleeping baby. He's the son of an Alpha and an Omega, a forbidden cross. What do you think Isaac will do with that information? What do you think the pack will say? He'll call him an abomination, a corruption of the bloodline. He'll challenge you for allowing it. Let him try, Zane snarled, the Alpha power surging, pressing against the walls of the room. He reached out, his hand hovering beside her face, not touching, but she felt the heat of his skin. The bond, it wasn't just the mead, Bailey. It was this. It has always been this. It defies law, it defies hierarchy, but it is real. And he looked at Rowan, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. He is not a mistake. He is a miracle. The raw conviction in his words shattered her. She swayed on her feet. Zane's hand finally made contact, his thumb brushing away a tear on her cheek. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of pure, undiluted connection through the bond, brighter and more terrifying than anything before. If only I had known how that touch would act as a catalyst. It was as if he had flipped a switch. The mate bond, now fully acknowledged and fed by truth, didn't just hum, it ignited. A surge of energy, not just emotional but profoundly physical, exploded from the point of contact. A wave of force, invisible but tangible, rippled outwards from them. The glass on the nightstand rattled. The window pane vibrated. On the bed, Rowan stirred and let out a sharp, startled cry that was not the cry of a hungry infant, but something else. A high, distressed sound that echoed with a strange, nascent power. Downstairs in the silent lodge, every single wolf, whether asleep or on watch, jolted upright. It was a psychic shockwave, a clarion call broadcast through the pack's collective subconscious. The unmistakable, resonant snap of a true mate bond solidifying, and with it, the vibrant, undeniable signature of a new, powerful pup. Bailey gasped, stumbling back. Zane's eyes widened in shock, then fierce triumph. From somewhere below, a furious, earth-shaking roar of denial split the night. It was Isaac, and it was followed immediately by the sound of splintering wood, a door being violently destroyed. Heavy, running footsteps pounded up the main staircase. Zane shoved Bailey behind him, turning to face the bedroom door just as it burst open. Isaac stood there, transformed. Not fully shifted, but his features were contorted, his eyes blazing red with fury, his fingers curled into claws. He wasn't looking at Zane. He was staring past him at Bailey and at the now wailing Rowan on the bed. "I knew it," Isaac roared, spittle flying. "The stink of forbidden blood. You've corrupted the line, Zane. You've mated with an Omega and bred a mongrel." Behind him, the hallway filled with the stunned faces of the pack, woken by the bond shock and the commotion. Stephen, Fiona, others, all wore expressions of confusion, awe, and dawning horror. Isaac took a step into the room, his claws extended. "The Alpha law is clear. The product of such a union is a threat to pack purity, to pack strength. I challenge you, Zane. For the good of the Moonstone Pack, I challenge you for the right to cleanse this stain." The challenge hung in the air, a death sentence. But Zane, standing protectively before his mate and his son, didn't flinch. He bared his teeth, a predator's smile that held no humor. "The challenge is accepted," Zane said, his voice colder than winter stone. "But not for the right to harm them." He took a step forward, his own power rising to meet Isaac's, the air crackling between them. "For the right to lead. And my first act, when I rip your throat out, will be to declare my son, Rowan, my heir." Isaac's roar of rage was drowned out by the collective gasp of the pack. Bailey clutched the footboard of the bed, her heart hammering against her ribs, as the two most powerful wolves in the lodge faced each other, and the fate of her child, and the entire Moonstone Pack, was set on a collision course with the rising sun. The bond snapped into place with the finality of a lock. In the ringing silence of the pack house great hall, Bailey felt the truth of it sear through her marrow. Zane's declaration wasn't just a claim. It was a law of nature, written in the sudden, quiet understanding between their heartbeats. Mate. What happened next was a blur of sound and motion. The collective gasp of the pack was a physical wind. Isaac's face, a mask of pure, undiluted fury, contorted before he spun on his heel and vanished into the crowd, a ripple of dark energy in his wake. Fiona, ever efficient, was already moving, barking quiet orders to clear the hall. But the stares remained, burning into Bailey's back as Zane's arm, still around her shoulders, guided her firmly away from the public eye. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The bond was a live wire, humming with his tumultuous emotions. A fierce, possessive protectiveness, a deep undercurrent of conflict, and a sharp, vigilant anger that was not directed at her, but at the threat Isaac represented. He led her through a heavy wooden door, down a stone-lined corridor that smelled of pine and earth, and into a private study. A fire crackled in a large hearth, and the moment the door clicked shut, the overwhelming press of the pack's attention vanished, replaced by the intimate, terrifying intensity of him alone. Zane released her, turning to face the fire. His broad shoulders were rigid. Rowan, perhaps sensing the shift, or finally exhausted into submission, gave a shuddering sigh against Bailey's neck and fell into a deep, sudden sleep. "You will stay here," Zane said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the stones beneath their feet. It wasn't a question. Bailey's defiance, dampened by the bond's shockwave, flickered back to life. "I have an apartment. My things are being retrieved by Fiona as we speak." He finally turned. His eyes, that impossible gold, held hers. In the quiet room, the bond between them felt louder. She could feel the echo of her own exhaustion in him, and beneath it, a relentless, driving purpose. "You are my mate. That child is my responsibility. You will live under my protection in the pack house. This is not negotiable, Bailey." The use of her name, not Omega, sent a shiver through her. "And what does that mean exactly? Am I a prisoner, a guest, a consort?" The word tasted strange. "It means you are mine," he growled, the alpha edge bleeding into his tone. It should have made her submit. Instead, it sparked a matching heat in her chest. "And I am yours. The bond declares it." The pack felt it. There is no going back from that. The pack also saw Isaac's face. She shot back, shifting Rowan's weight. "He hates me. He hates Rowan." That look, it was personal. Why? Zane's jaw tightened. A log in the fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks. "Isaac has ambitions. A true-born heir from a proper beta mate would solidify my line. An Omega with a secret pup." He trailed off, his gaze dropping to Rowan's sleeping face. A profound, complicated emotion swelled through the bond, longing, guilt, a ferocious tenderness that stole Bailey's breath. "A true-born heir changes everything," he finished quietly. The implication hung in the air, thick as smoke. He knows, or he suspects. Bailey's arms tightened around her son. The secret, the one she'd clutched to her chest for months, felt like a bomb ticking between them. A sharp, efficient knock at the door broke the tension. Fiona entered without waiting, her arms laden with bags, diapers, formula, a familiar, worn duffel bag of Bailey's clothes. Another pack member followed with a portable crib. "The apartment is cleared, Alpha. The lease will be dealt with." Fiona's eyes flicked to Bailey, neutral and assessing. "Isaac has gathered a group near the north gate. They're vocal. Stephen is with them." Zane's expression darkened. How vocal? Questioning the allocation of resources, questioning the disruption. Fiona's careful wording was more damning than a shout. "The Silverfang scent is stronger on the wind tonight. The patrols are tense. 2 crises, one internal, one external." Bailey felt the weight of them settle on Zane's shoulders through the bond. He gave a short, sharp nod. "Increase the border patrols, triple them. No one challenges the line tonight. As for Isaac," he paused, his gaze returning to Bailey and the sleeping pup. "I will handle him, ensure they have everything they need here, post a guard at this corridor. No one enters but you or me." Fiona nodded, set the supplies down, and left with the other pack member, closing the door softly behind her. The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of a fortress preparing for siege. Bailey stood awkwardly in the center of the room, the epicenter of the coming storm. "You should go to your border," she said, surprising herself. Zane looked at her. "My first border is here." The words, simple and absolute, unraveled something tight in her chest. She looked away, focusing on the practical. She laid Rowan down in the crib that had appeared, her fingers lingering on his soft cheek. When she straightened, Zane was closer. "You should rest," he said, his voice softer now. "There's a bedroom through that door. It's safe." "I don't think I remember how to sleep," she whispered, the admission pulled from her by the strange intimacy of the bond. A low, almost soundless rumble started in his chest. A purr, a comfort sound. It resonated through the bond, a warm, steady wave that lapped at the sharp edges of her panic. Her knees nearly buckled. "Try," he said. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead. The contact was electric, a jolt that was both thrilling and profoundly soothing. "The bond needs calm to settle. He needs you calm." He nodded toward Rowan. "I will return." He turned to leave, his presence already pulling away, and the room felt colder for it. "Zane." The name felt foreign and right on her tongue. He stopped, hand on the doorframe. "Thank you for coming before, for not letting me fall." He didn't turn, but she felt the acknowledgement through the bond, a pulse of fierce, unwavering certainty. "I will always come." Then he was gone, and she was alone with the sleeping infant and the whispering, terrifying new connection in her soul. The promised guard was a silent, hulking shadow at the end of the stone corridor. Bailey watched from the crack in the study door for a moment before retreating. The room was opulent by her standards, worn but rich leather chairs, shelves of books, the ever-present fire. The connected bedroom was simple but clean, with a large bed and an attached bathroom. It felt like a gilded cage. She moved on autopilot, preparing a bottle with the formula Fiona brought, though Rowan slept on. The normalcy of the action was surreal. Here, in the heart of the power that had always made her feel small, she was performing the most basic act of motherhood. The pack house itself seemed to breathe around her, a living entity of creaking timbers, distant footsteps, and the low, occasional murmur of voices that echoed through the halls. She couldn't rest. Every nerve was live wire. The mate bond was a new limb she didn't know how to control. In quiet moments, she could feel a distant, simmering anger, Zane's anger, she realized, like a storm cloud many miles away. She could feel his focus, a sharp, predatory attention fixed elsewhere. On the border, on Isaac. A sudden, louder commotion echoed from deep within the house. A raised voice, cut short. Bailey froze, the formula canister in her hand. She crept to the study door, pressing her ear against the cold wood. Out of line, Isaac. It was Stephen's voice, but strained, trying to placate. Am I? Isaac's reply was venomously clear, much closer than she'd expected. He must have been in the main hall. He parades his Omega and her bastard before the pack, claims a bond that shames our traditions, and drains our resources for a squalling pup, while Silverfang licks its chops on our border. And you call me out of line. The bond was felt by everyone, another voice, calmer, reasoned. It is the moon's will. The moon's will, Isaac scoffed. Or a clever Omega's manipulation. She hid the pup for months. What else is she hiding? The Alpha's judgment is clouded. His priorities are compromised. Bailey's blood ran cold. She could feel a corresponding surge of fury through the bond. Zane was hearing this, or sensing it. It was getting closer. My priorities, Zane's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade, cold and deadly quiet, are the strength and security of this pack, which you are currently undermining. The hallway fell silent. Bailey could picture it. Zane, a tower of contained wrath, facing down his smirking second. Undermining? I'm voicing the concerns you're too distracted to see, Alpha, Isaac said, the title a sneer. We have a rogue pack scenting blood. Our warriors are anxious. Their Alpha is playing house with the lowest rank, claiming a pup of unknown origin. It reeks of weakness. Silverfang will see it as an invitation. The only invitation they will receive is death, Zane said, his voice dropping to a growl that vibrated through the floorboards. And the next person who refers to that pup as of unknown origin in my presence will join them. Do I make myself clear? The challenge hung, absolute and lethal. If only she had known how quickly that challenge would be answered. A new sound pierced the standoff. A long, mournful howl from outside, rising from the direction of the northern woods. It was not a Moonstone howl. It was alien, aggressive, and close. A second howl joined it, then a third, forming a taunting chorus just beyond the territory line. Silverfang. The pack house erupted into controlled chaos. Boots pounded on hardwood, doors slammed, and voices barked orders. The internal conflict was instantly swallowed by the Bailey stumbled back from the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. The bond was flooded with Zane's hyper-alert focus, a razor-sharp shift from anger to battle-ready calm. She heard his command, clear even through walls. Isaac, Stephen with me. Fiona locked down the house, no one in or out. She rushed to the crib. Rowan had woken, not crying, but staring with wide, dark eyes, as if he too could feel the sudden surge of predatory energy in the air. She scooped him up, holding him close as she paced before the fire. Minutes ticked by, each one an eternity. The howls had stopped, replaced by an even more ominous silence. The bond was a confusing torrent, flashes of cold night air, the scent of pine and a strange, coppery wolf, the tense readiness of muscles coiled to spring. Zane was in the woods. He was facing them. A sudden, searing spike of pain lanced through the bond, not hers, but his. It was sharp, blinding, and gone as quickly as it came, followed by a wave of dizzying disorientation. No, Bailey breathed, clutching Rowan so tight he whimpered. Then a new sound, not a howl, a scream, human cut short. It came from inside the house. The guard outside her door, she heard a guttural snarl, a thud against the stone wall, and then silence. Her blood turned to ice. The lockdown had failed. Something was inside. The door to the study handle rattled, then shook violently. Not a knock, an assault. Wood splintered around the heavy lock. Bailey scrambled backward, her eyes darting for a weapon, an exit. There was none, only the fireplace. She grabbed the iron poker, her hands slippery with sweat, and stood before the crib, putting herself between her son and the door. With a final, sickening crack, the lock gave way. The door swung open. It was not a silver-fang wolf. It was Isaac. His clothes were torn, his knuckles bloody. His eyes glowed with a feral, triumphant light. The scent of the forest and a faint, foreign wolf, Silverfang, clung to him. "The Alpha is detained," Isaac panted, a cruel smile twisting his lips. A Silverfang ambush at the border. Terrible thing. He fought bravely, but he was outnumbered, distracted. He took a step into the room. Bailey raised the poker, her whole body trembling. The bond was a chaotic storm of pain and rage and distance. Zane was alive, but hurt, and too far away. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice a thin thread of sound. Isaac's gaze slid past her, landing on the crib. On Rowan. His smile vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated hatred. "The pack cannot be led by a weakling tied to an omega, and it certainly cannot have its future threatened by a sickly, fatherless pup." He took another step. The firelight gleamed in his eyes. "But everyone knows the truth, don't they, Bailey?" he whispered, the words a venomous secret in the shattered room. "He's not fatherless, he's a Blackwood, and that makes him the only thing standing between me and what I deserve." He lunged. Bailey swung the poker with a scream that was pure defiance. It was a move born of desperation, not skill. Isaac caught it easily, wrenching it from her grasp and sending it clattering across the stone floor. He backhanded her, a casual, brutal blow that sent her sprawling against the hearth, stars exploding behind her eyes. Rowan began to wail, a high, terrified sound. Through a haze of pain, Bailey saw Isaac loom over the crib. He reached down. "No heir, no mate bond, just a tragic accident," he murmured, his hand closing not around the child but around the blanket. "A fire, perhaps. Started in the stress of the Alpha's disappearance." He yanked the blanket, with Rowan in it, from the crib. Bailey pushed herself up, a raw, guttural sound tearing from her throat. It wasn't a human sound. It was the echo of the bond, of a mother's fury, of an Omega's last, defiant stand. She launched herself at him, not with strength, but with a complete, reckless abandon. She crashed into him, her fingers clawing for his eyes, her teeth sinking into the arm that held her son. Isaac roared in surprise and pain, more from the shock of her ferocity than the damage. He dropped the bundled blanket. It fell toward the stone floor. Time slowed. Bailey twisted, throwing herself beneath the falling bundle. She hit the ground hard, Rowan landing on her chest with a soft whump, his cries hiccuping into startled silence. Isaac stood over them, his face a mask of murderous rage. He raised a foot, clad in a heavy boot, aiming for her head. A window exploded inward. Shards of glass rained down like diamonds in the firelight. And through the opening, a massive, midnight black wolf landed in a crouch on the study floor. Its fur was matted with blood and burrs, one foreleg held awkwardly, but its golden eyes burned with a fury that made the air crackle. "Zane," Isaac froze, his triumph shattering into sheer, panicked disbelief. They said you were down." The black wolf didn't growl. The sound that came from its throat was the promise of absolute annihilation. It gathered its haunches, ignoring its injured leg. Isaac made a choice. In a flash of movement, he shifted. His wolf was a large, brindle-gray beast, all sharp angles and malice. He didn't attack. He spun and bolted for the shattered study door, fleeing into the dark halls of the pack house. Zane made to give chase, but his injured leg buckled. He let out a sharp whine of frustration, his head swinging back toward Bailey and the crying pup on her chest. The bond flooded with a relief so profound it felt like pain. Bailey, clutching Rowan, stared into the eyes of her wounded Alpha, her mate. The enemy was inside the walls. The traitor was one of their own. And as the first shouts of alarm began to echo through the lodge, shouts of breach, and Isaac has turned. Bailey knew one thing with crystalline certainty. The war for the Moonstone Pack had just begun, and it was happening in their home. The bond snapped into place with the finality of a lock. One moment, Bailey was a solitary, desperate creature. The next, she was anchored to a son. Zane's presence wasn't just beside her. It was within her, a low, resonant hum of power and protectiveness that vibrated in her very bones. The pack's collective gasp was a physical sound, a rush of air that swept through the great hall. Mate. The word wasn't spoken aloud, but it echoed in the new, silent channel between them. It was a truth, a law, a catastrophe. Bailey's knees buckled, but Zane's arm was already there, a band of iron holding her and Rowan steady against him. His scent, pine, snow, and alpha, wrapped around her, drowning out the sour milk and despair. Rowan's cries hiccuped into stunned, wet silence. "You see," Zane's voice rolled out, amplified by the bond, by his authority, by the sheer shock in the room. It wasn't a shout. It was a declaration that settled over everyone like a weight. "This is not a discussion. This is Pack. This is mine." Isaac looked as if he'd been struck. The disdain on his face had frozen, then shattered into something far more dangerous, understanding, and a hatred so pure it shimmered in his pale eyes. He took a step back, his jaw working. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The challenge was now a silent, simmering war. Stephen, the elder who'd complained about resources, simply bowed his head, the fight gone out of him in the face of a primal truth. Zane didn't wait for further dissent. He turned, his body shielding Bailey and the pup from the crowd, and began walking toward the rear of the hall. The pack parted like water before a ship, a sea of wide eyes and lowered gazes. Bailey's own thoughts were a scrambled mess, drowned out by the new, overwhelming signal of Zane. His focus was a laser: get them safe. Secure the perimeter, deal with Isaac. Silverfang. The sounds of the hall, the crackling fire, the rustle of clothing, a stifled cough, faded as he led her down a wood-paneled corridor. The air grew warmer, quieter. He stopped before a heavy oak door, opened it, and guided her inside. Zane's private study was a world away from her apartment. It smelled of old books, polished leather, and the same Pineland snow scent that was now etched into her soul. A fire blazed in a stone hearth, casting dancing light on shelves of books and a large, worn desk. Through an open archway, she glimpsed a shadowed bedroom. "This is yours," Zane said, his voice lower now, the alpha timbre softened into something gruff. "The connected bedroom, the bathroom, it's secure. No one enters without my express command." He finally looked down at her, his gold-flecked eyes scanning her face, reading the exhaustion and shock. "You will stay here." Bailey found her voice, thin and reedy. "Zane, the bond is," he stated, cutting her off. "It defies tradition. It complicates everything, but it is. And it changes nothing of my earlier words. You are under my protection. Rowan is Pack." He stepped closer, and the hum inside her intensified. "But now, Bailey, you will tell me the truth you have been hiding. Who is Rowan's father?" The question hung in the air, sharper than any knife. The warmth of the room turned claustrophobic. This was the precipice. The bond thrummed between them, a live wire of connection that made lying feel impossible. She opened her mouth, a denial on her lips, but the truth, fueled by a desperate, bone-deep trust the bond was forcing on her, welled up. "If I tell you," she whispered, her eyes darting to Rowan's sleeping face, "it will start a war." Zane went very still. Only the flicker of firelight moved in his eyes. "A war is already brewing on our northern border. Silverfang is probing, testing our strength. I need to know every threat, every weakness from within and without. Tell me." The sound of a brisk knock on the door broke the moment. Fiona's voice, efficient and neutral, filtered through. "Alpha, the supplies you requested, and Isaac has called an urgent meeting of the senior betas in the war room. He says it's regarding the border." Zane's gaze never left Bailey's. A low growl built in his chest, a sound of pure frustration that vibrated through their new bond. "Leave the supplies by the door, Fiona. Tell Isaac I will be there shortly." "Yes, Alpha." They listened to the retreating footsteps. Zane exhaled, a controlled release of tension. He moved to the door, retrieved a large box and a cooler bag, and brought them inside. He set them on the desk with a soft thud. The cooler, when opened, revealed pre-filled bottles of formula, a container of homemade puree, and other essentials. The box held diapers, wipes, soft blankets, and tiny clothes. It was more than she'd had in weeks. A sob caught in Bailey's throat. It wasn't just the items. It was the terrifying, undeniable proof that she was seen, that Rowan was provided for. By him. "Feed him, bathe him, rest," Zane ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I will post Fiona outside this door. She is loyal to the pack and to me. You can trust her. I will return when the meeting is concluded." He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. The bond pulsed, a current of shared urgency. "Think on your truth, Bailey. Our enemies are at the gate. I cannot protect you from what I do not know." He left, closing the door softly behind him. A definitive click of the lock echoed in the quiet room. Alone, the bond felt like a phantom limb, achingly present, yet Zane's physical absence made the room feel emptier. Bailey moved on autopilot. She warmed a bottle, tested it on her wrist, and sank into a large armchair by the fire. When she offered the nipple to Rowan, he latched on with a desperate, grateful urgency, his little fists kneading the air. The sound of his contented gulps was the only noise. What have I done? The bond was a cage of gold. It meant safety, but it also meant she could never truly hide again. Zane would always know her distress, her fear, and he wanted the one secret that could destroy everything. As Rowan fed, her eyes grew heavy. The 30-plus hours of sleeplessness, the emotional tsunami, the warm room, it all conspired against her. She fought it, jerking awake as her head nodded, but the pull was too strong. With Rowan finished and burped, swaddled in a new, soft blanket, she curled around him on the deep rug before the fire, using her own body as a barrier between him and the world. She slept. The dream was not a dream, but a memory, sharpened by fear and the new, strange channel of the mate bond. She was in the woods 9 months ago during the last full moon run. As an Omega, she was meant to stay at the periphery to observe, not participate in the hunt. But the moon's pull was strong, and her wolf, usually so subdued, was restless. She'd strayed too far from the main group, lured by the scent of night-blooming jasmine. A crack of a branch, not from her. He emerged from the shadows between the pines. Not Zane. Tall, broad, with an aura of coiled violence and a scent of frost and metal. His eyes glowed amber in the moonlight. A silver-fang enforcer. He shouldn't have been here, this deep in Moonstone territory. "Lost, little Omega," he'd purred, his voice like gravel. Panic had iced her veins. She turned to run, but he was faster. A hand clamped over her mouth, an arm like steel around her waist, dragging her behind a thick outcrop of rock. The moon's power was on him, a frenzied, aggressive heat. His intent was a foul wave against her skin. She fought, silently, desperately, but an Omega's strength was no match for an enforcer's moon madness. His teeth grazed her claiming gland. A whimper died in her throat. This was it, defilement. A brutal claiming that would be an act of war if discovered. Then, a roar split the night. A blur of black fur and fury slammed into the silver-fang wolf, tearing him off her. Zane. In his half-form, a monster of muscle and wrath. The fight was brutal, short. Snarls, the sickening crunch of bone, a yelp of pain. The Silverfang wolf fled, bleeding and limping, into the deeper darkness. Zane turned to her. His chest was heaving, his claws were dark with blood, and his eyes were pure, molten gold. The moon's call and the fight had his control hanging by a thread. The scent of her fear, her vulnerability, and the lingering stench of the other male filled the small space. He didn't speak. He looked at her, really looked, and she saw not just her alpha, but a male whose control had just been stripped raw. The forbidden line between them, always there, suddenly glowed white-hot. He took a step toward her. She should have run. She should have submitted. She did neither. His kiss wasn't gentle. It was possession, a reclaiming, a silent roar against the violation that had almost happened. And she, in her shock and the dizzying aftermath of terror, kissed him back. It was one night. One secret, stolen, moon-maddened night under the pines. He'd left before dawn, the weight of his position crashing back down. She'd fled, carrying the shame and the secret and the life growing inside her. Bailey jerked awake, a gasp tearing from her throat. The fire had burned low. Rowan slept peacefully beside her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, the memory as vivid as the flames had been. The truth, Rowan's father was Zane, and the male who had attacked her, who Zane had maimed, was Silverfang. If Isaac or anyone else discovered this, they wouldn't just see a forbidden bond. They would see a catalyst. They would say Rowan was conceived in an act of violence against a rival pack, that his existence was a provocation. Isaac would use it to claim Zane was reckless, that he'd brought this border conflict upon them. He would challenge for the alpha position, and Rowan would be seen not as a pup, but as a political weapon, a symbol of disgrace. The soft knock on the door made her jump. "Bailey," it was Fiona. "It's been a few hours. I have a tray of food for you. May I enter?" "Why, yes." Fiona entered, carrying a tray with a steaming bowl of stew, bread, and water. Her kind, efficient eyes took in Bailey's tear-streaked face, the sleeping pup. She said nothing, setting the tray on the desk. "The Alpha is still in his meeting. It's tense. Voices have been raised." "Isaac?" Bailey asked, her voice hoarse. Fiona gave a slight, confirming nod. "He is questioning the Alpha's focus, suggesting personal matters are clouding his judgment regarding the Silverfang threat." She hesitated, then added quietly, "The bond it is felt by the senior members. It is a great shock. Some are awed, others are fearful. Change is coming, Bailey, for better or worse." After Fiona left, Bailey picked at the food, but it tasted like ash. The truth was a bomb in her chest, and Zane was demanding the detonator. The sound of raised voices from somewhere deep in the house seemed to grow louder, carried by the drafts in the old lodge. She was feeding Rowan again, when the door opened without a knock this time. Zane stood there. The controlled authority he'd worn earlier was frayed. His shirt was rumpled. His hair looked as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his eyes held a storm. The bond flared, transmitting his anger, his frustration, and a deep, underlying worry. "Isaac is mobilizing a faction," he said without preamble, closing the door and leaning against it. "He's using the bond, using your presence as proof of instability. Silverfang has made another move. A scout was caught and killed on the border. They are escalating. Isaac wants a preemptive strike. I refused. He called it weakness." Zane pushed off the door and walked to the fire, staring into the embers. "The pack is divided, at a time when we must be united." He turned, his gaze piercing her. "The truth, Bailey, now, before this splinters us beyond repair. Who is the father?" This was it. The cliff's edge. She placed a sleeping Rowan in the makeshift nest of blankets, her hands trembling. She stood, facing the fire, unable to look at him. "You asked if telling you would start a war," she began, her voice barely audible over the crackle of the dying fire. "It already did. That night 9 months ago in the woods, you didn't just chase him off. You broke his jaw, tore his shoulder. You left your scent, your mark, on their enforcer." Zane went utterly silent behind her. "He was high-ranking. A brother to their Alpha, I heard later," she continued, the words spilling out like poison. "Silverfang has been probing, testing, seeking weakness for months, but it's not just territory they want, it's vengeance. For the humiliation. And Rowan." She finally turned, tears streaming down her face. "Rowan is the living proof of that night. He is yours, Zane, conceived when you claimed me from their grasp." The revelation landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. Zane's face drained of color. His eyes dropped to Rowan, sleeping innocently by the fire, and then back to her. A myriad of emotions flashed across his features: shock, dawning horror, a fierce, blazing pride, and finally, a grim, cold understanding. "Mine," he breathed, the word a vow and a curse. The bond between them swelled, a torrent of shared realization. The political ramifications unfolded instantly, a chessboard of doom. Isaac, if he knew, would declare Rowan an abomination born of conflict. He would demand the pup be rejected to appease Silverfang. He would use it to overthrow Zane. "Isaac's suspects," Zane said, his voice now deadly calm. "The specific venom he holds for you for Rowan, he must have pieced it together. The timeline. My intervention that night was noted, but the reason was never disclosed." He ran a hand over his jaw. "He will use this. He will go to the elders, to the pack, and he will say I have doomed us all for an Omega and a bastard pup." A frantic, heavy pounding suddenly erupted on the study door, not Fiona's polite knock. "Alpha!" It was Stephen, his voice panicked. "You're needed at the Northern Watch Post immediately. Silverfang, they're not just probing. They've assembled a force. Isaac has already taken a group of enforcers to meet them. He says he's acting in the pack's defense, but he didn't wait for your command." Zane's head snapped up, his alpha instinct surging. The bond screamed with his alarm. Isaac was forcing a confrontation. "Stay here," Zane commanded, his body already coiling for action. "Lock the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone but Fiona or me." He was at the door in 2 strides, yanking it open. Stephen stood there, pale and trembling. But as Zane moved to leave, a figure stepped into the doorway, blocking it. Isaac, he was dressed for battle in tactical gear, his expression one of cold triumph. His eyes swept past Zane, landing on Bailey and the pup by the fire. A cruel smile touched his lips. "Leaving so soon, Alpha?" Isaac's voice was a silken threat. "Before you hear the news, I've just returned from a parley with Silverfang. A fascinating conversation. They are willing to stand down, to withdraw their forces. They even offer a potential alliance." Zane's body was a live wire. "What did you promise them, Isaac?" Isaac's gaze locked on Rowan. "Nothing we can't afford to lose. They want only 2 things. First, the head of the Alpha who mutilated their Alpha's brother." He paused, letting the threat hang. "And second, the pup born of that night's violence. A peace offering, a symbol of Moonstone's contrition." He looked directly at Zane, his challenge absolute. "So, Alpha, what's your order? Do we go to war for an Omega's mistake? Or do we secure our pack's future with one small sacrifice?" The world stopped. The crackle of the fire, Rowan's soft sigh in his sleep, the pounding of her own heart, it all funneled into a silent, screaming point. Isaac had not just gone to the border. He had negotiated with the enemy, and he had offered them Rowan. Zane stood between his traitorous second and his family, the truth now a weapon in the hands of his rival. The war wasn't coming. It was here. The silence after Isaac's declaration was absolute, more terrifying than any roar. He knew. The words hung in the great room's chill air, a poison seeping into the shocked stillness. Bailey's arms locked around Rowan, her heart a frantic drum against his small back. Zane hadn't moved, but the air around him thickened, vibrating with a subaudible growl that made the floorboards tremble. "Explain," Zane commanded, the single word carved from ice. Isaac's smile was a razor cut. "The pup, he doesn't just smell of you, Alpha, he smells like you, not a pack resemblance. A direct genetic echo. It's faint beneath the human stink of formula and despair, but it's there. An Alpha's heir, born to an Omega in secret." He turned his contemptuous gaze on Bailey. "Did you think you could hide it forever? That we wouldn't know?" What happened next changed everything. The pack's collective shock shifted, a tide turning. Whispers erupted, not of awe now, but of scandal and betrayal. Stephen stepped forward, his earlier concern hardening into accusation. "An illegitimate heir, born in defiance of pack law. This is an abomination, Zane. It undermines everything." Bailey found her voice, a raw, desperate thing. "He is a political weapon," Isaac shot back, his eyes blazing with triumph. "And you have delivered him right into our laps. The law is clear. An Omega cannot bear an Alpha's child without the formal pack-witnessed bond. The child's status is forfeit. He can be claimed by any pack member of suitable rank to be raised correctly." His gaze slid to Zane, a challenge. "Or disposed of." The word disposed of unleashed something in Zane. The control snapped. A roar erupted from him, not of anger, but of pure, unadulterated dominance. It wasn't just sound. It was a pressure wave that shoved against the walls, making the fire in the hearth gutter. Windows rattled in their frames. Every wolf in the room, including Isaac, flinched, their instincts forcing their heads down in a sudden, violent submission. Only Bailey and Rowan, shielded by the bond, remained upright. Zane's form blurred. One second he was 10 feet from Isaac, the next he had him by the throat, slamming him against the stone wall beside the fireplace. Dust and splinters rained down. The crack of Isaac's skull against rock was a sickening thud. "You will speak of my son," Zane snarled, his face inches from Isaac's, his eyes molten gold, "with reverence, or you will not speak at all." The room held its breath. Isaac choked, clawing at Zane's wrist, his feet dangling. The scent of his fear was sharp and sour. "The law," Isaac gasped. "I am the law." Zane's declaration shook the lodge. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper the whole pack could still hear. "The bond Bailey and I share was ordained by the moon itself, long before any of our laws were written. It defies your petty codes. Rowan is my son, my blood, my heir. This is not a debate. This is a fact. You will accept it or you will challenge me for it. Here, now." He dropped Isaac, who crumpled to the floor, coughing. The threat hung in the air, more potent than any physical blow. A direct challenge for the Alpha position would be a fight to the death. Isaac, still wheezing, looked from Zane's enraged face to the pack members, whose submissive postures had not relaxed. He saw no support, only fear of Zane's unleashed power. The silence was broken by a soft, mewling cry. Rowan, disturbed by the roar and the tension, began to fuss. The sound was a pinprick in the balloon of violence. Bailey instinctively rocked him, her eyes locked on Zane's back, a silent plea. Zane turned from Isaac, his shoulders heaving. He looked at Bailey, and the fury in his eyes banked, replaced by a ferocious, unwavering certainty. He strode to her, and the pack parted like water before a ship's prow. "Everyone out," he said, his voice still carrying Alpha weight but softer now. "Fiona, secure the perimeter. Double the patrols on the northern border. The Silver Fangs will scent this discord. Go." There was no argument. The pack scattered, a rush of footsteps and low murmurs. Isaac, shooting a look of pure venom toward Bailey, was helped up by a wary Stephen, and they disappeared into the hallway. Soon, only the three of them remained in the vast, echoing room, the fire crackling as the only sound. Zane stopped before Bailey. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a shelter. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, words failing her. The adrenaline was receding, leaving a bone-deep tremor in its wake. Rowan's cries escalated. "He's hungry," she whispered. The mundane need a stark contrast to the preceding chaos. "And everything's in the study." "Come on." Zane's hand, warm and steady, found the small of her back, guiding her. They walked through the quiet halls of the pack house, the tension slowly seeping away, replaced by a fragile, exhausted calm. The door to his private study felt like the seal of an airlock, shutting out the hostile world. Inside, the fire was low, the room bathed in warm, shadowy light. Bailey sank onto the large sofa, her hands shaking as she prepared a bottle from the supplies Fiona had brought. Zane stoked the fire, his movements efficient, giving her space. The only sounds were the pop of burning wood, the click of the bottle against the counter, and Rowan's hungry gulps once he latched on. Bailey watched her son eat, the simple, vital act grounding her. "He knew," she said finally, her voice hollow. "Isaac knew, or he guessed. He has a keen nose for weakness and opportunity," Zane said, coming to sit in a chair opposite her. He didn't look angry anymore, just profoundly tired. "It was only a matter of time. The secret was a weapon you carried alone. Now it's out, and the weapon is in my hands." He said the law. "The law is wrong." Zane's interruption was firm, but not unkind. "It was written by alphas who feared the chaos of true mate bonds, who wanted to control lineage and power. Our bond, it is the oldest law. The first law." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Bailey, you have to stop fighting me. You have to let me in. Not as your alpha giving orders, as your mate." The word, spoken aloud in the quiet room, hummed with energy. A tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. "I was scared. I am scared for him. What happens now? Isaac won't let this go." "No, he won't," Zane agreed. "He will bide his time, gather support from those like Stephen who fear change. And he will use the Silver Fang threat to try and undermine me, to say my focus is divided." He looked at Rowan, his expression softening into something odd and pained. "But he is also my greatest strength, our greatest strength." He stood and moved to sit beside her on the sofa, careful not to jostle Rowan. His nearness was a comfort, his scent of pine and snow cutting through the lingering sourness of her fear. "Tomorrow, at the full moon run, I will present you both to the pack. Officially. Not as a hidden shame, but as my family. The bond will be felt by everyone under the moon. It will silence most of the doubt." "And if it doesn't?" Bailey asked, the old defiance sparking, born of protectiveness. "Then they will deal with me," Zane said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He reached out, his finger tracing the back of Rowan's tiny, clutching hand. "He has your stubbornness." A weak laugh escaped her. "He has your lungs." For a moment they just sat in the firelight, the infant between them, a fragile bridge. The world outside was full of threats, Isaac ambition, the rival pack, the weight of tradition. But in this room there was a tentative peace. If only I had known, Bailey thought, watching Zane's large, capable hand so gentle against their son's, that the very thing I was hiding from was the only thing strong enough to protect us. The night deepened. Bailey must have dozed off, because she woke to find herself tucked into the large bed in the connected bedroom, Rowan sleeping soundly in a makeshift crib nearby. Zane was gone from the room, but she could feel him, a steady, warm presence just on the other side of the door, standing guard. She slept again, a dreamless, heavy sleep, for the first time in months. The pack house at dawn was a different creature. Sounds of life echoed through it, the clatter of pans from the kitchen, the murmur of voices, the heavy tread of enforcers heading out for patrol. Sunlight streamed through the high windows of the study. Fiona arrived with a quiet knock, bringing a tray of food, more formula, and fresh clothes for Bailey. Simple, soft things that were clearly not from her own meager apartment. "The Alpha is on the northern ridge with the scouts," she said, her tone neutral as ever. "He asked me to see to your needs. The full moon gathering is at sundown in the clearing." Bailey ate, the food tasting like ash, her anxiety returning with the sunlight. She tended to Rowan, her movements automatic. The entire day stretched before her, a terrifying countdown. As afternoon bled into evening, the energy around the pack house changed. A palpable buzz of anticipation thrummed through the timber walls. The pack was gathering. Bailey could hear them, dozens, maybe over 100 wolves, congregating outside, their combined presence a psychic weight she felt in her teeth. Zane returned just as the last rays of sun gilded the treetops. He had changed into simpler, sturdier clothes suitable for the shift. His face was grim, etched with the concerns of the border, but his eyes warmed when he saw her. "It's time," he said, holding out a hand. Her legs felt like water. "Zane, trust me," he said, and it wasn't an order, it was a request. She took his hand, his grip firm and sure. With her other arm, she cradled Rowan, who was swaddled and sleepy. They walked out of the study, through the now empty lodge, and out the great front doors. The sight stole her breath. The clearing before the pack house was filled with members of the Moonstone Pack. They stood in a wide semicircle, facing the raised porch where Zane led her. Faces she knew and faces she didn't, all watching in silence. The air was cold and crisp, charged with the imminent moonrise. Isaac stood at the front of the crowd, his expression unreadable. Fiona and Stephen flanked him, their stances wary. Zane stopped at the edge of the porch, turning to face his pack, pulling Bailey gently to stand beside him. The setting sun painted the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. "Moonstone Pack," Zane's voice, amplified by alpha power, rolled over the clearing. "You felt the disturbance last night. You heard the accusations. Before the moon rises and our wolves run, you will know the truth." He looked down at Bailey, then at the bundle in her arms. "This is Bailey. She has always been one of us, though some," his gaze flicked to Isaac, "have forgotten her worth. This is Rowan. He is 8 weeks old. He is my son." A ripple went through the crowd, but no one dared speak. "The bond between Bailey and me is not a scandal. It is a blessing from the moon herself, a true mate bond that has waited for its time. It defies our old laws because it is older. It is stronger." He put a hand on Bailey's shoulder, the contact sending a jolt of warmth and strength through her. "They are under my protection. They are my family. To challenge them is to challenge me. To harm them is to forfeit your life." The words were absolute, final, the law of the Alpha. At that moment, the first silver edge of the full moon crested the distant hills. A collective shiver passed through the pack. The pull was immediate, a magnetic ache in the bones. Isaac stepped forward. "An alpha must be strong for his pack, not divided by a weak omega and a bastard pup," he shouted, his voice straining against Zane's dominance. "The Silver Fangs are massing on the border right now because they scent your weakness. How can you lead us when you are tied to that?" He pointed a condemning finger at Bailey. It was the final provocation. Zane's control, so tightly held, shattered, but not into rage, into something more profound. A brilliant, silver-gold light erupted from him, enveloping Bailey and Rowan in its glow. It was the visible manifestation of the mate bond, of his claim, of his love. It pulsed once, twice, a heartbeat of pure power that washed over the clearing. Every wolf gasped, feeling its undeniable truth, its staggering strength. In that light, there was no weakness, only a terrifying, unified power. But Isaac, desperate, made his move. He didn't charge Zane. He shifted, his clothes tearing, his body contorting into the form of a massive, slate-gray wolf with furious amber eyes. And he lunged, not for Zane, but for the smaller, vulnerable target, for Bailey and the child in her arms. Time seemed to slow. Bailey saw the wolf leap, jaws gaping, aimed at Rowan. A scream lodged in her throat. She turned her body, shielding her son. She never had to. Zane moved with impossible speed. He didn't bother to shift fully. One moment he was a man, the next a blur of contained power. He intercepted Isaac's leap in midair. The sound was not of a fight, but of a judgment. A single, brutal crunch of bone. A pained yelp cut horrifically short. Zane landed, standing over Isaac's now human, broken form. Isaac lay crumpled on the wooden porch, his neck bent at an unnatural angle, his eyes wide and empty. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the whisper of the wind in the pines. Zane, his own breathing steady, looked up at his pack. His eyes held the cold, clear light of the now fully risen moon. "The challenge," he said, his voice carrying to the farthest wolf, "is answered." He then turned to Bailey, the lethal authority melting away, replaced by a concern so deep it made her ache. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Are you all right?" She could only nod, clutching Rowan, who had begun to cry at the violence. Zane faced his pack once more. "The line is drawn, my mate, my son, my pack, one family under the moon. Now, run." The final word was a roar of release. As one, the pack threw back their heads and howled, a soaring, unified song of allegiance and wild freedom. Then, in a wave of shifting muscle and fur, they transformed, streaming into the dark woods like a river of shadow and moonlight. Zane remained. He looked at Fiona, who stood stoic amidst the chaos. "See to that," he said, nodding to Isaac's body. Fiona bowed her head. "Yes, Alpha." Then Zane finally shifted. His transformation was not a Chinese letter of cloth, but a flowing, powerful expansion. Where the man had stood was now a colossal wolf, his fur the color of midnight frost, his eyes the same molten gold. He was majestic, terrifying, and beautiful. He nudged Bailey gently with his great head, a warm huff of air against her skin, an invitation, a promise. The fear was gone. The hiding was over. With Rowan safe against her chest, Bailey reached out and buried her fingers in the thick, powerful fur of her mate's shoulder. Under the watchful eye of the full moon, the Alpha of the Moonstone Pack, his Omega and their son, stood together as the howls of their pack echoed through the ancient hills, a song of new beginnings written in blood and moonlight.